Thanks for staying with us here on the Urban Debate on Mirror Now, and we're going to extend our programming and continue with this special broadcast. It's been an action-packed evening, but the portfolio allocation details have just about begun to emerge. And really, the conversation would have been incomplete just talking about the new ministers who've taken oath if we actually don't talk about what is it that they're going to be doing. So we decided to extend the programming and give you some of those details as well. Education goes to Dharmendra Pradhan. So far, the oil minister, the petroleum minister in the Modi cabinet, but Dharmendra Pradhan will now be given new skills and education as his portfolio. Ashwini Vaishnav, one of the new additions to the cabinet who took oath today, Ashwini Vaishnav will be given railways along with, I believe, IT and telecom as well. Piyush Goyal, the additional charge of textile industry, textile ministry, oil and urban development to Hardeep Puri. Urban development is what he already has as one of his key portfolios. He is now also being given the Petroleum Ministry since Dharmendra Pradhan is moving to education. And the big one, since it's been in news so much of late, the Health Ministry, Dr. Harshvardhan's out. Mansukh Mandavia, a member of parliament from Gujarat who was earlier in the cabinet as well, is back, and he has been given the charge not just of health but also of chemicals and fertilizers. Dharmendra Pradhan for Education Ministry, and more details are now emerging. Piyush Goyal now being given the additional charge of textiles. Like I told you earlier, the Cooperation Ministry, the new ministry that has been created, Ministry of Cooperation as it's called, has gone to Mr. Amit Shah, the Home Minister of our country, and so he's going to be handling that in its inception years. Science and Technology, which was also with Dr. Harshvardhan, who's now not in the cabinet anymore, has actually gone to Prime Minister Modi and the PMO. So the PMO is going to be handling Ministry of Science and Technology. Jyotiraditya Scindia has been given civil aviation. So aviation ministry goes to Jyotiraditya Scindia as well. In his previous avatars, he's handled multiple portfolios in the cabinet. This time, though, as was being speculated by many, he has been given the civil aviation ministry. These are the details that are just coming in. So we now know who's going to be our new railways minister, as Piyush Goyal gives that charge up to take on additional responsibilities. That has now gone to Ashwini Vaishnav. Piyush Goyal takes on textile ministry charge as well. Ashwini Vaishnav, the new guy in. There is also Dharmendra Pradhan, who's been given skill development and education. Hardeep Puri as the new petroleum minister. Jyotiraditya Scindia as the aviation ministry. Smriti Irani to hold women and child welfare ministry. So that's what's been given to her. Let's get quick reactions in to Mr. Sheshadri Chari first on these names and what he makes of it. Yes, Mr. Shriram Sheshadri, my apologies. Go ahead, please. I think you're on mute, Mr. Shriram.
Yes, sorry, Tanvi. Yeah. I think civil aviation to Scindia is because this is one of the stressed industry as of now post-COVID. I think civil aviation is definitely needs a lot of attention. I think Scindia has held this position, if I'm not wrong, earlier when he was in UPA government, if I'm not wrong. So I think this is a great one, and he's definitely a young leader and charismatic and make definitely a mark. Dharmendra Pradhan with skill development and education. I think this is another very strained area. India probably world over also, but India probably went to 20 odd years behind on the divide between urban and rural learning outcomes because of this COVID. The urban has had a lot of online classes, but the rural has not been able to cope up with. And definitely a plateful for him. But I seriously doubt whether this is going to be probably disappointment on this. But I'm upfront saying this from the Petroleum Ministry's performances based on that. But otherwise, hopefully, he's going to make a mark on this education and skill development. Very important aspect, post-COVID survival, post-COVID recovery. You need this, important aspect. Cooperative Ministry to Amit Shah. definitely a taskmaster, a new ministry, definitely a good one. And also, incidentally, the cooperative movements, Anand and all came from Gujarat, and then lessons learned from there, definitely useful. And women and child welfare, Smriti Irani, probably not suits her best, I would say, for women empowerment and other things. Definitely. Hardeep Puri, another bureaucrat turned politician, getting Petroleum Ministry. Once again, a lot of attention to it, especially fuel price increases. If he's going to bring some magic, at least, it's in the safer hands. A person who understands administration, person who knows how to manage the official activities. I think that's excellent. That's excellent allocation in my opinion. Science and technology makes sense to be with the PMO because a lot of decisions, investment, infrastructure decisions have to come from there. Makes sense to be with the PMO. Anyway, most of the decisions are being done by the PMO on the policy side of it, direction side of it, and science and technology lying with them definitely adds value in my opinion. Overall, minus one or two, probably a disappointment. Good allocations in the cabinet reshuffle, in my opinion.
Okay. So far we were discussing the representation of various castes and communities and regions, but now it really boils down to the brass tacks and work that has to be done. And I think what is very interesting is Hardeep Singh Puri, who's largely managed to match up with the expectations on what has to be delivered and how it has to be communicated. He's also picked up very well on the political aspect of it and in terms of taking on the rivals on the politics of it. So him being given Petroleum Ministry for me is also specifically very interesting. Our managing editor, Vinay Tiwari, also joins me right now. Vinay, so much of speculation was happening, especially on the 4 key ministries. We now know that for health, there is a new face from Gujarat, Mr. Mandavia, who will be the health minister. Even for IT, a new phrase has been brought up, Ashwini Vaishnav, who will have a very tough challenge. How are you seeing the way this is right now panning out with the few names that we now have?
Two things very clearly. One, I think we should, very in all honesty, tell our viewers, all of this coming from sources as of now. The official press note has still not come. But we are expecting and hearing from the sources this is how the ministry is going to look like. And some very interesting changes in it. And for me, you mentioned a couple of them, of course, civil aviation going to Sitharaman, and they are being very important because remember, one of the most critical issues in front of the Ministry of Civil Aviation is also the privatization of Air India, which remains the biggest albatross around the government's neck and something that they've been looking to do for quite a while, quite unsuccessfully. But I personally believe that one of the other more interesting announcements so far that we've heard is the announcement of Shri Ashwini Vaishnav as the railway minister. And I say so because railways is one ministry that actually has a huge potential in terms of cutting across all state boundaries and is a truly central ministry in that sense, which has deep impact on the way the economy and the country and, of course, even the industry works. And the reason I say so is because, remember, he's a first-time member of parliament. Comes from Odisha and has a very interesting background. I mean, he's been an IS officer, a young IS officer. In fact, he's a 1994 batch IS officer who actually quit his service and then went into the world of corporate as well. Has worked in Siemens, has worked in General Electric, and actually is an MBA from Wharton School. So if this is, as an experiment succeeds, it's going to be possibly indicative of the more dramatic things that the government expects to do in railways. Remember, railways is one particular ministry where the government has been toying with the idea, and the government in the past has floated certain trial balloons on certain aspects of Indian Railways being corporatized. Obviously, the Railways is a very strong unionized organization and has met with some resistance, but the fact remains that there is a larger feeling in the government that there needs to be a corporatization of railways, including some aspects of privatization as well. And the fact that Mr. Vaishnav has an expertise and a background in the public-private partnerships which he has handled in the past, that's a very interesting choice that I see. The other thing that I see very interesting, and I have a feeling it's going to get talked about, is the clubbing of the health ministry and the chemicals and fertilizer ministry. And I say so because remember, the pharma industry, for them, the health ministry is not the only ministry of interest. It's actually a lot of the pharma industry decision making is linked to the chemicals ministry as well. And the fact that they've clubbed it together is possibly an indicator that there is some amount of synergy that they're trying to look for. Obviously, there'll be questions raised as well because the pharma industry is a very powerful industry in this country, and there will be the people will be watching this particular change quite closely going forward. I think the other big announcement is the fact that the sources are telling us that the newly formed Ministry of Cooperation is being given to Mr. Shah. Now, that's as high-profile a ministry as you can imagine it to become once you hand it over to somebody like Mr. Shah, because Mr. Shah clearly is the closest confidant of the Prime Minister, pretty much the number 2 in the cabinet, and the fact that they've given this newly formed ministry to him tells you that this particular ministry may have a greater and a much wider role than what we know. We don't really know the exact contours of this ministry, but the fact remains that this sounds to be this seems like the most interesting, unusual thing that we've heard so far.
Well,